Who really is Jamal Carter that made the whole police station suddenly realize they were facing not just a legal case, but a monumental reckoning? Morning light filled Detroit as people rushed to work. Jamal Carter walked through the crowd, his tailored brown suit and polished shoes standing out. Jamal moved confidently, unnoticed. As a black man, he understood that attention wasn't always a blessing. It could just as easily bring suspicion. After breakfast at his regular diner, he checked his phone and replied to his mother's text. Smiling to himself, he adjusted the cuffs of his shirt and headed for his sleek black sedan parked nearby. Near his car, two officers approached. Their hard stares and firm strides spoke volumes. He didn't recognize them, but their intent was unmistakable. "Excuse me, sir," one said sharply. Jamal turned to face them, keeping his expression neutral. "Yes, officer, how can I help you?" Officer Riley glanced at him and said, "Can I see some ID?" Jamal paused briefly, his instincts flaring. He had been taught from a young age how to handle situations like this. Stay calm, stay polite, don't give them a reason. "May I ask why, officer?" he asked, his voice steady. "You match the description of someone we're looking for," Riley replied, his tone clipped. His partner, Cooper, stood a step behind him, his hand resting casually near his holster. Jamal nodded and reached slowly into his pocket, retrieving his wallet. "All right," he said, handing over his driver's license. "But I'd like to know what I'm being accused of." Riley barely glanced at the ID before focusing his attention back on Jamal. "What are you doing in this neighborhood?" he asked, his tone laced with suspicion. "I had breakfast at the diner down the street," Jamal replied, keeping his voice calm. "I'm just heading to my car to get to work." "What kind of work do you do?" Riley pressed, stepping closer. "I'm in law," Jamal replied, choosing his words carefully. "A lawyer, huh?" Riley asked, doubtful. "Shush, someone. You don't look like one." Cooper chuckled under his breath and leaned in slightly. "Got anything illegal in that car of yours? Drugs? Guns?" Jamal's stomach tightened, but he refused to let his frustration show. "There's nothing illegal in my car, officer. You're welcome to check, but I assure you, I haven't done anything wrong." "You don't get to decide how we do our job," Riley snapped. "Step away from the car." Jamal hesitated. He knew he hadn't done anything wrong, but he also knew how quickly situations like this could escalate. His father's advice echoed in his mind. "Stay calm. Don't let them provoke you." "All right," Jamal said, raising his hands calmly. He stepped back from the car, his every movement deliberate and measured. Without warning, Riley grabbed Jamal's arm and twisted it behind his back. The sudden pain made Jamal wince, but he stayed composed. Before he could say anything, Cooper joined in, forcing Jamal to the ground. "What are you doing?" Jamal protested, his voice strained but controlled. "You're under arrest for resisting arrest," Riley said coldly as he snapped the handcuffs onto Jamal's wrists. The commotion had drawn the attention of bystanders. An elderly woman watching from her balcony shouted down, "He didn't do anything! Leave him alone!" A young man walking his dog stopped and pulled out his phone, recording the scene. "This is insane," he muttered. "They're arresting him for nothing." Jamal noticed the phone and felt a brief hope. Maybe this footage could help later. For now, though, he was powerless. As Riley and Cooper dragged him to his feet and led him to their squad car, Jamal looked back at the small crowd that had gathered. Their faces were filled with concern, anger, and disbelief. Taking a deep breath, Jamal steadied his voice. "This isn't over," he said loudly, his voice carrying through the growing crowd. "This isn't over." The interior of the police station buzzed with tense activity. Jamal Carter sat silently in a holding cell, his wrists sore from the tight handcuffs. The cold metal bench beneath him offered no comfort. His mind raced, but he stayed composed. Meanwhile, Officer Riley and his partner Cooper stood at the front desk, filing their report. They looked smug, unaware their control was slipping. A younger officer, Kevin Martinez, approached them, his expression curious but concerned. "Hey, Riley," he said, lowering his voice. "That guy you brought in, what's his name?" "Carter," Riley replied dismissively. "Jamal Carter, why?" Martinez hesitated. "He's a civil rights lawyer. He's fought police misconduct." Riley's confidence faded. "What are you talking about?" he snapped. "I'm serious," Martinez said, pulling out his phone and quickly searching online. Within moments, he found the article and showed it to Riley. The headline read, "Jamal Carter, the civil rights lawyer, taking on police corruption." Riley's face turned pale as he read the article. Cooper peered over his shoulder, his expression quickly mirroring Riley's unease. "Are you sure it's the same guy?" Cooper asked, his voice wavering. "Positive," Martinez replied. "I didn't recognize him at first, but it's definitely him. You two just arrested someone who's fought major cases against departments like ours." Riley's jaw tightened. He grabbed the phone and walked briskly toward the holding area, leaving Cooper and Martinez behind. When he reached Jamal's cell, Riley stopped in front of the bars. Jamal looked up, his calm demeanor unchanged. "So," Riley began, his tone a mix of defensiveness and apprehension. "You're a lawyer, huh? A civil rights lawyer?" Jamal raised an eyebrow. "I thought I mentioned that earlier," he said evenly. "But you didn't seem interested." Riley's frustration grew, but before he could respond, a commanding voice interrupted. "What's going on here?" Lieutenant Laura Peterson stepped into the room, her sharp eyes scanning the scene. Peterson, new to the precinct, had quickly earned a reputation for being fair but firm. "Lieutenant," Riley said, stiffening, "we brought him in because he matched the description." Peterson glanced at Jamal and then back at Riley. "What's the charge?" "Resisting arrest," Riley replied, avoiding her gaze. Peterson crossed her arms. "And what exactly did he do to resist?" she asked pointedly. Riley hesitated, searching for an answer that wouldn't come. Lieutenant Laura Peterson stepped out of the holding area and into the bright, chaotic front of the police station. Chants echoed through the station. Justice for Jamal and end police misconduct filled the air. Officers watched the protest uneasily. Jamal Carter stood in the release area, free of handcuffs but far from free of what had just transpired. He glanced at Peterson. "What happens next?" he asked, his tone calm but edged with determination. Peterson sighed. "We'll conduct an internal review. I'll make sure this incident doesn't get buried." Jamal nodded but didn't respond. He knew that promises made inside these walls rarely translated to action outside. He had been here before, not in this exact situation, but in similar battles where words held little weight without accountability. Outside the station, the energy was electric. Cameras captured the moment. Jamal stepped out into the sunlight, his presence commanding immediate attention. The crowd erupted in cheers, their support palpable. Cameras clicked furiously, capturing every angle as Jamal descended the steps. One reporter managed to push through the throng, a microphone extended toward Jamal. "Mr. Carter, do you have a statement about your arrest?" Jamal paused, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. He spoke clearly, his voice carrying over the noise. "This is not just about me. It's about everyone who has been unfairly targeted, silenced, and treated as less than equal. True justice isn't just a word, it's action, it's accountability, and it's long overdue." The crowd cheered louder. Jamal's words had struck a chord, but he wasn't finished. He gestured toward the reporters. "I'll take questions, but first I want to hear from the people. Their voices are the ones that matter." Back inside, Peterson stood near the window, watching the scene unfold. She tightened her grip on the desk. Riley approached cautiously, his demeanor a mix of defiance and unease. "Lieutenant," he began, but Peterson cut him off. "Save it, Riley. What happened today was unacceptable. There will be consequences." Riley's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He turned and walked away, his steps heavy with the weight of impending repercussions. Meanwhile, outside, Jamal continued addressing the crowd. Leaders joined to amplify his message. They called for reform, demanding changes to policies that allowed misconduct to flourish unchecked. Jamal stood among them, both a symbol and a participant in the fight for justice. Hours later, as the sun began to set, the protest remained strong. Jamal stood with his supporters, his resolve unwavering. He knew this was just the beginning of a much longer battle, a battle for systemic change. Lieutenant Peterson, watching from her office, made a decision. She picked up the phone and dialed a number she hadn't called in years. When the voice on the other end answered, she said firmly, "We need to talk. Changes need to happen, and I'm willing to make them." Do you think Jamal Carter's arrest was an isolated incident, or does it reflect a bigger issue in society? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.